Welcome in, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
This is Everything Sucks, Let's Fix It, episode 35. My name is Ben Mayer.
My name is Anthony Buono.
Today is February 13th, day before Valentine's Day, 2024, and we are not wearing suits.
We're not wearing suits. This is the first time we are coming at you casually.
Yeah, to be honest, we got one comment on our YouTube video that made us realize suits aren't really the right vibe for us.
Literally all the comment was like, love the content, guys. Great work. But suits? Really?
Yeah.
Is that the vibe you guys are going for? And we just both looked at each other. We're like, is it the vibe? I guess not.
No, not really.
And then it kind of made me feel like, why the fuck have we been wearing suits this whole time?
Exactly. So maybe we'll skyrocket now.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. It was how dumb we looked in our monkey suits. That
Yes.
was why we weren't, on MSNBC or Fox News yet.
Totally.
Okay, so let's start us off, Ben. What's our first current event?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing happening right now is the comments that former President Donald Trump just made about NATO, especially NATO with a NATO ally. So he was at a campaign event recently. I think it was in South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina.
He was recounting a conversation with a president of a big country in Europe. He said, quoting the other president, "Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us?" And Trump said, "You didn't pay. You're delinquent." He said, "Yes, let's say that happened." Trump said, "No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay."
The them in this context is Russia, by the way. So he's saying, I would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want.
Yes.
Is his exact quote that he said on the campaign speech. Purposefully, excitingly, enthusiastically.
Yeah. So this is happening, obviously, in the context of Russia having already initiated war with another country on the European continent, taking a chunk out of their land. And at a time when Russia is literally on the warpath, he decides to make these comments actively weakening the alliance, right? So the U.S. is by far the most powerful country in NATO, and its nuclear arsenal is seen as the ultimate security guarantee.
Yes, because all of this NATO stuff, it works as mutually assured destruction. And one of the benefits of NATO and the United States being in NATO is all these little individual countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they don't need their own nuclear arsenal because they are reliant to the United States nuclear arsenal, and they're linked together, right? So now this means that, okay, less countries in the world need nukes. If Trump comes out here and he's saying, oh, Latvia, you know what? You didn't hit your 2% GDP target. And I want to get more into that in a second, right? If you didn't pay, whatever, then we're not going to protect you with nukes. Then you've eliminated mutually assured destruction for these countries. And Russia just has total full reign to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. And the whole point of NATO's alliance, there's language in the treaty that says all for one and one for all. Basically, an attack on any one country is supposed to be treated by all countries as an attack on them, and they're supposed to respond that way. This 2% GDP spending target is not a contingency for that to be the case, right? And so what I'm thinking is Putin is just salivating when he hears this from Trump, because he's like, okay, well, now I can push it a little bit further, right? NATO is now more of a gray zone. It's not a hard line if Trump becomes the president, that is.
Right. And so now, and that 2% target, again, it's not written that it needs to be anywhere. It's the suggestion. And, they say, they're not hitting the 2% target. Do I wish that countries were hitting the 2% target? Yeah, in a lot of cases, I do wish they were hitting that 2% target. But they're not hitting it by spending 1.4 or 1.5. It's not like they're spending zero.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like they're literally having zero military and the United States is the only military in NATO. That's not the case.
Yeah.
So the framing is kind of false. Right?
True.
There are countries like Poland that are going to be spending 5% of their GDP on their military in the coming years.
Yes. Well, and I think the framing is also incorrect, faulty, because it's not like this money is coming back to the U.S. military at all, right? It's not like we're reaping the benefits of this. It's just like, okay, we're spending as much as we are on our military, and we're going to use that in the case of an attack on NATO, which would be the case anyways. If you want to have less of a responsibility, let's just spend less on the military. And I think this is going to lead to Europe. Europe is they're figuring out that they can't trust us for their own defense as much. And these countries that aren't spending at least 2% on GDP, their number is dwindling because of this, because they're aware that the security environment is becoming less stable. And I think it's a good move from them, but it's also a comment from Trump that just destabilizes things more, makes war more likely in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, NATO has what's been able to secure the peace for, the large majority post-World War II on the continent.
Yeah.
Without NATO and the mutually assured destruction guarantees that lie within it, and the Article 5, which is the one for all, and what is it?
All for
one, one for all.
Yeah.
Without that, the whole continent sits in limbo in face of the Russian bear. And it sucks that this guy is, kind of eliminated the national security Republican from the Republican Party, right? There used to be different sections of the Republican Party, right? You had the evangelical movement, you had, which is like the pro-life side, you had the tax cut people, the pro-business people, and then you had the national security conservatives. Mm-hmm. Well, these national security conservatives have no room to fit in this new Republican Party that wants to see the dissolution of NATO, pretty much.
Yes.
Because that's what Trump is suggesting here. When he's saying that he won't go through with Article 5, well,
what's the point?
What's the point of NATO then?
Yeah, and there's reporting that said that in 2018 Trump wanted to withdraw the U.S. from NATO, but that his the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor prevented it from happening. If Trump gets a second term, and we know that he is trying to appoint loyalists to all of his important positions, we can definitely expect the U.S. to be pulled out of NATO. The reactions, I want to get into the reactions because there are just a few. The Biden administration called it appalling and unhinged, what Trump said. The chief of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, said, any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the U.S., and puts American and European soldiers at increased risk. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who is the leader of the biggest country in Europe, said Trump's comments were, quote, solely in the interest of Russia. And he added that, quote, any relativization of NATO's guarantee of assistance is irresponsible and dangerous. And then the EU foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, said, NATO cannot be an a la carte military alliance depending on the humor of the president of the U.S.
Yeah, and that's a good example of the European Union saying, all right, the United States is not a reliable partner. We need to do our own thing. Mm-hmm. This goes back a couple of years ago. Macron in France was pushing for a united European military.
Yeah.
Right. And this is kind of the same thing. He's like, we can't be dependent on the humor of the president. Mm-hmm. That's where this is all coming from. Everyone is just reliant on Trump's feelings and how Trump feels about things.
Yeah.
Because the ideology base of the Republican Party that used to be national security, right? That whole sect of the party has been ostracized for good reason in a lot of cases, right? The war in Iraq and all those things.
Yeah.
Right. All of that is because of the national security mindset and all that stuff and the war hawks that were in that wing of the party. But this is the totally wrong direction you want to be going in.
Yeah, well, it's just the Ukraine war is a different story than what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Yes.
Like Russia just invaded them unilaterally.
Yes.
It should be obvious that they will keep going down the warpath if there aren't strong deterrent measures.
Yeah, and there are people who suggest that NATO is some imperialistic force or whatever. I don't agree with that. But if you want to say that, whatever. I'm not gonna get into that. But it makes people feel like, oh, wait a second. Is Donald Trump the anti-war candidate because he wants us to not be in NATO and he doesn't want to keep fighting going on in Ukraine? No, he is the pro-war candidate. He's just for bad wars. He's on the record saying he wants to invade Mexico, okay? He's for wars, just the bad ones, okay? Yeah. He doesn't want to defend Ukraine because in a lot of instances, he agrees with the ideology of Putin's Russia more often than he does with an ideology of a liberal European Union liberal order.
Yeah.
And he's against that.
I agree with that.
Now, the Senate and the Congress, right? So the House of Representatives and the Senate have been attempting to keep NATO safe from any future president. But this is very much directed towards Trump. So Marco Rubio and another senator, Marco Rubio being a Republican from Florida, ran against Trump in the 2016 Republican primary. They've passed legislation in the Senate that has made it impossible for a president to leave NATO without the expressed agreement from Congress. So the president cannot unilaterally leave NATO anymore. It has to go through Congress. And nothing like that would ever pass Congress.
No.
But there's issues with this. Because lawmakers touted the lawmakers have said that this defense policy legislation was great because we're going to stay in NATO. The president can't get us out. But it's not enough. There are many, many loopholes to this. The president could refuse to appoint a U.S. ambassador to NATO headquarters in Brussels, or could order U.S. military commanders to dial back exercises with NATO counterparts, and he could even refuse to come to a country's aid if it's attacked, because the United States, the president of the United States, is the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, that's
so like it's great if we can say on paper that you're not allowed to leave NATO without congressional approval.
Yeah.
But the president just doesn't have to execute the law.
That's the thing. He's still the one who is the main executive of the law. Yeah. So like if he just chooses not to, we don't really have a system in place to rapidly overcome the president's orders in the case of military matters.
Exactly.
The one other perspective I want to talk about from this, because I want to give credit wherever credit can be given, right? NATO is probably less beneficial to the U.S. than it is to any of the other countries in NATO.
Totally.
We are completely protected by massive geographical barriers called oceans from any invading party that might try to come for the U.S. Our economy is not as dependent on peace in all of these European countries, especially Eastern European countries, as the Western European countries are. So when it comes down to it, the real question is like, do you think it's okay to let war just happen anywhere else in the world as long as we're insulated from it? That's how I see this.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to me, it's such a clear answer that no,
right?
War is horrible. And if we have any agency to do anything to prevent it, then we should do it, especially when we're not even really doing anything differently. We're just saying that we're going to protect any NATO country that is attacked. Yes, we might have to do something, but the whole point is staying strong in this treaty so that we won't have to do anything.
Right. The stronger this treaty is, the less likely it is that we have to use our military, because no one wants to mess with the United States anyway, guys.
Exactly.
We're the fucking best.
Yeah.
It's just the truth.
We are easily the strongest military in the world.
So, and the United States needs Europe to be stable, because we have a larger geopolitical adversary in the Pacific, and we cannot waste any more time or money dealing with stuff going on in Europe. That's the truth.
Yeah, it's already bad that our attention is split between Ukraine and Gaza right now, right? Like, and obviously we're still keeping an eye on China. Everything that is diverting our resources from China, including Ukraine and Gaza, that puts us at higher risk from the real adversary that we're facing off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Russia is this regional power that we do want. And also, I want to add this. So like that 2% GDP target, if every country were to hit that 2% GDP target, it would help the United States a lot, because a lot of them have to purchase arms from the United States.
Okay.
A lot of them have to then go and buy guns from the U.S.
I see.
That then boosts our defense industries.
Okay.
But then the question is, okay, who actually benefits from the defense industry so much? It does help people in the country because it does make some jobs.
Yes, totally.
But, it doesn't, help everyone in the economy, because we don't have a good tax system, and the people who make the guns don't necessarily give the money back to the people who
Yeah.
But, that's the whole system here. And I really hope this brings out that side of the national security conservatives that will say, okay, this is ridiculous. Trump is a danger. Trump can't win re-election. This is too much.
Yeah.
I'm sick of talking about Joe Biden's age. All right. This is
so much more real.
This is so much more impactful.
The consequences, yeah.
It will matter so much more in your life, in people in Europe's life.
Yeah.
This is what actually impacts the world. And so the New York Times publishes an article the other day titled, Trump's NATO's comments might be a bigger deal than Biden's age. And it's like, yeah, who the fuck was suggesting otherwise, New York Times?
Yeah.
It's almost like it was so much of a parody headline that I couldn't believe it was real. It's like, you couldn't make that up. That was like coming out of The Onion,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, it just pisses me off that our political conversation is so off about the things that actually matter.
Yeah, the framing is just completely wrong.
Because, dude, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it puts them on a level playing field just by reading the title, right?
Yes.
And then, like, if you don't read anymore or think about it anymore, it's programming people to be like, oh, oh, us leaving NATO could be as bad as Biden being old. Which is insane.
Which is just insane. It's like this stupid false equivalency of neutrality, right?
Yeah.
Where like everything has to exist on a level playing field. There are two sides to every argument, and then go at it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case. Turns out, leaving NATO isn't as bad as, being 80. So it is what it is. But that's what Trump has been saying about NATO, which is insane.
Yeah.
Let's stick on this national security stuff.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the foreign aid bill that has been passed by the Senate. It was passed, I think, 70-29 this morning. Okay. The vote I have recorded down here is for cloture.
Yep.
Yeah, but so the 70-29, 70 senators voted to support the bill. What's in the bill? Well, this is $95 billion for military aid going to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. So all these different national security things that we literally just talked about. Everywhere where the United States has some type of military interest or conflict going on, getting money and weapons to those areas of the world.
And I want to jump in just to say what the breakdown is a little bit more specifically. $60 billion to Ukraine, $14 billion to Israel, around $4 billion to Taiwan.
Okay.
There's a little bit left over for Gaza aid and other things.
Gotcha.
But those are the main chunks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then the reason that this is so important is because this has been like a saga over the last 3 months. How are we going to pass more Ukraine funding, right? Well, GOP members of the Senate and of the House said, we're not passing any foreign aid unless you give us a border bill. We're not doing anything for international security until you give us national security by securing our border.
Yep.
So GOP members of the Senate, led by Langford, the senator from Oklahoma, was working to get border provisions outlined with Democrats and independents to build this compromise that would be added on to the Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel funding. Well, the border policy totally has been scrapped.
Yep.
Every Republican has turned against it. Even the guy who negotiated it didn't vote for it to move into debate.
Yep.
Everyone has shot it down. The Republicans in the House said it was dead on arrival. Don't even bring it to me. So now no more border. So that's why this is $95 billion. It was like 120 with the border stuff. Border is out. Only international security. $95 billion. Trump has been intensely against this. And he has been pushing back against this emphatically because he doesn't want any money. I don't know why he doesn't want this money going to Ukraine, but he doesn't want the money going to Ukraine.
I think it's more political.
Right. It has to be, right? He doesn't want Biden to get the win.
No wins. Yeah.
No wins. 0 wins.
I think so.
Yes. Trump has said no money in the form of foreign aid should be given to any country unless it is done as a loan, not just a giveaway.
I also think it just it's no wins for Biden, but it also secures his base. It's very on brand, right? No money leaving here.
Yes.
So,
but then that's the question. Is it a giveaway? Is it money leaving here? That's the question we have to ask. We have to attack this framing because is it even true? And the answer is no. This money is not simply a giveaway. Almost 90% of the funds that Congress approves for Ukraine and military aid is spent in the United States building new weapons or replacing ones that were already sent.
Yeah.
That is what's happening. 90% of the money is just going into producing more weapons in the United States. So out of the money, we've given a lot of money to Ukraine already, and the benefits to the states have been widespread. We've seen a lot of benefits in California, Arizona, Arkansas, Pennsylvania. We're talking about over $1 billion plus in economic development going to these countries because of this. Now, this framing has issues, right? Because I'm not a war hawk. I don't want an economy built on international wars and bullets, okay? Warfare is not a replacement for welfare by any means. But it is wrong to sell this budgetary supplement package for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel aid as being wasted abroad, because that's just not true. It's being invested into the industrial base of the United States.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. So Trump's framing of giveaway, that's not true.
No.
And it's frustrating that just becomes the de facto position of so many members of the Republican Party.
Yeah. And it's frustrating that it's so easy for them to get that point across.
Yeah.
Right? Like there seems to be so little skepticism, so little call out of this. I haven't heard anyone else say this exact thing that we're saying.
No, I haven't heard almost anybody say this. No. I mean, if you go, I feel like you could go and you can look at some policy things written by the Biden administration on their website that might talk about it. But this isn't something that they're going to the mat with. They're not talking about it in depth.
No.
And it's frustrating because it just make the argument to people.
Yeah.
So much of this garbage that Trump spews out of his mouth could be pushed back against if you push back.
Yeah.
If you don't just let him control the conversation. Like, really push back on all of his premises, right? I don't know. It's like these people don't have spines sometimes to really go to the mat and take these challenges head on.
Or I wonder if they're just skeptical that people will listen to them enough to believe them, to understand.
To understand? Do they even care?
Yeah.
So much of it is like, oh, Trump said it. End of story,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Listen, there is also this part of the United States that is deep and true of like America first, and I don't give a shit about what happens outside of this country. But Mitch McConnell actually said something really good to this effect, okay? He says, I know it's been quite fashionable in some circles to disregard the global interests we have as a global power, to bemoan the responsibilities of global leadership. This is idle work for idle minds, and it has no place in the United States Senate. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the type of mindset we should be going in with in a lot of these circumstances.
It is weird that we're now so praiseworthy of the war hawk that is Mitch McConnell.
Yes.
But that is the stage of war that we're in.
Yeah. And listen, the United States has done some terrible things. If we were involved in a war going on in like Iraq, like in 2003, it would be a different story.
Or say we were invading Yemen with boots on the ground right now because of the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. Yes. We would not be on board with that.
No, if we were invading Yemen to install a new type of government, no, we would not be for that under any circumstance. But when it comes to Taiwan, Ukraine, we are objectively on the right side of this conflict.
Yeah.
Israel, we are not on the right side of this conflict.
No.
I don't think there is a right side to this conflict. Both people deserve a state. Well, that's a whole other conversation. The point is, when it comes down to this NATO conversation of funding Ukraine, we are the good guys preserving international and independent sovereignty for states.
Yes, totally.
That's it.
Totally.
That's it. So now the question comes, okay? The Senate has passed this bill. Will the House pass it? Will Mike Johnson be able to rally his caucus of clowns into voting for this type of bill? Well, Johnson has expressed that support for Ukraine, he generally feels the support for Ukraine, but he has not said whether he'd slate a House vote on the Senate's aid bill, which many conservatives in the House oppose.
So I have Johnson's statement up here about the bill.
Let's do it.
It came out last night. I'm going to read it, okay?
Yep.
House Republicans were crystal clear from the very beginning of discussions that any so-called national security supplemental legislation must recognize that national security begins at our own border. The House acted 10 months ago to help enact transformative policy change by passing the Secure Our Border Act. And since then, including today, the Senate has failed to meet the moment. The Senate did the right thing last week by rejecting the Ukraine, Taiwan, Gaza, Israel immigration legislation due to its insufficient border provisions. If you want to learn more about that, go check out our video or last week's episode. And it should have gone back to the drawing board to amend the current bill to include real border security provisions that would actually help end the ongoing catastrophe. Instead, the Senate's foreign aid bill is silent on the most pressing issue facing our country.
Wait.
The mandate of national security supplemental legislation was to secure America's own border before sending additional foreign aid around the world. It is what the American people demand and deserve. Now, in the absence of having received any single border policy change from the Senate, the House will have to continue to work its own will on these important matters. America deserves better than the Senate's status quo.
Wait, that's insane cognitive dissonance. That's insanity.
Yeah.
That's insanity. We literally just came off this whole conversation about the border, and the Republicans have been saying we don't need any law change. We just need a different president to enforce the laws that already exist. They've been saying explicitly.
Were they saying that?
Yes, they said that explicitly.
Okay.
They said we don't need any legal changes. We just have to enforce the laws that already exist. They said that explicitly. That's exactly what they said.
It's crazy.
They said we don't need any legal changes. Now they're saying we do need legal changes. We gave you a bill that has the national and international security involved, and now you're going to come back and you're going to tell me that we need to go back and get the border back in? You just said you wanted it separated a week ago. This is insane. How do people not see that this is insanity? That makes me so fucking pissed, dude. That makes me so mad. I hate the inconsistency.
That's wild.
That's why they were saying, they were like, leave it to the election. You'll be able to secure the border in 270 something days. Remember that quote?
That is crazy.
It's because they're getting Trump to be back. They want Trump to be back in office.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. See, I'm seeing Trump posted on social media, a border bill is not necessary to stop the flow at the border. He said, close the southern border, no bill necessary.
That's what I'm saying. And now they're saying a bill is absolutely necessary. How do people take these guys seriously?
That's absurd.
It's been a week, bro. Did you get hit in the head?
We don't need a border bill, according to Senator Ted Cruz. Wow.
They literally said a week ago they don't need a border bill. Now they're sitting here claiming they need a border bill.
Mike Johnson himself, the one I just quoted, said President Biden falsely claimed he needs Congress to pass a new law to allow him to close the southern border.
What is happening? How are we supposed to work with these people?
That is absurd.
No, how are you supposed to work with these people?
I mean, there is no way.
There's no way.
There is no way.
There's no way. What can Democrats do to try to get around this absolute fucking madhouse? Democrats are already lining up the path of submitting a discharge petition. What is a discharge petition? We got to go into that for a second. So a discharge petition means 50% plus one of the House can sign this petition that automatically guarantees a vote of a specific bill on the House floor.
Okay.
Normally, the Speaker of the House has full control about what gets voted on the floor. But with a discharge petition, if you get 50% plus one, which I think is 218 members, 217 members?
218, I think.
Yeah. If they get that many members to sign on to this petition, they can bypass the Speaker of the House and get the bill to the floor.
Okay.
But the issue is, any Republican who signs on to a discharge petition will have their career ruined forever. They will never get elected to anything ever again. Yeah. They will be invited to zero Republican circles.
Yep.
Their whole career is done. So
God,
I know
that we have a two-party system, dude. Terrible.
But you know what? I'm going to attack the voters for a second.
Okay.
Please don't punish your representatives for compromising. Please don't.
No.
We are in a position with divided government, one of the smallest House majorities in our entire history as a nation. Okay? If you can't get over the fact that you don't have full control of the country and that you got to work across the aisle to get things done under certain circumstances, you do not have a place in government. And voters should know that going in and then reward people who at least do their best to make it work with the political conditions that they find themselves
in. It should be the opposite. Like those who are willing to have a spine and break from their party when it's necessary should be the ones rewarded.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's another path to this. Brian Fitzpatrick, he's a moderate Republican coming out of Pennsylvania, but again, moderate in quotes because he's still not saying he would sign this discharge petition. He has indicated that he's open to writing a whole new national security package with Democrats that would include funding for Ukraine and the southern border under more among other priorities. That's so ironic given what we've just been through this entire week. Fitzpatrick could have just voted for the other bill. It could have been done.
True.
But now he's like, nope, I want to start the whole process over again. And we know what this looks like. We know when we go and start the whole process over again, nothing's getting done anyway. So
it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. I just pray that there is a discharge petition, that there are enough Republicans. I'm looking at you, Don Bacon from Nebraska. I'm looking at Mike Lawler from New York, maybe Mike Lawler. He's been a big national security hawk, international security and Ukraine hawk. Just come around, guys.
We need like
please.
5
Less.
Republicans.
2.
Really?
Yeah, because tonight there's an election. It's Tuesday, February 13th when we're recording this. Tom Suozzi is running for election in New York's 3rd district. If he wins that, the House majority for the Republicans shrinks to 2.
Yep.
So anyway, please do the discharge petition and pass this funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. For the love of God.
Yeah. And even this, I'm not that excited for. Like, we're talking so much about the politics rather than the bill. $14 billion for Israel kind of sucks.
That sucks ass. I don't want $14 billion going to Israel.
No.
And if it is going to Israel, I want way more conditions on it about like the limitations of settling going on in the West Bank.
So next up, we want to get into the Finnish presidential election that happened last week.
This is going to be the only show where you can see 2 Americans talking about the Finnish presidential election. Just want to point that out.
Hell yeah. So the center-right candidate Alex Stubb defeated leftist Green Party candidate Pekka Haavisto. This was billed as the most important election in decades because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but honestly, I'm not sure it was by the end based on the candidates because they ended up having very similar policies. In Finland, there's a president and a prime minister. The president is head of state, while the prime minister is head of government. That means the president's role is more as the representative of Finland to the world and commander-in-chief of its armed forces. So the reason this is billed as the most important election in decades is, of course, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how it's on the warpath, how Finland borders Russia, and it just joined NATO last year. So there's a lot of concern about security. So Stubb is extremely pro-Europe and very anti-Russia. There were slight differences at the end of the election that came up about how open the president would be to having weapons and troops from NATO allies placed in Finland, specifically at the border with Russia. Stubb, who was elected, was more open to that. But generally, this is just a huge shift from what Finland's policy has been since the end of the Cold War, and even before that, because they had been all about appeasing Russia, right? Making sure that the big bear didn't come in and trample all over them because they were nice enough. And then as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, they thought, oh, fuck, this might not work anymore. Russia is clearly willing to go out on the warpath, so we need to take a harder stance and make sure that it's clear that we're completely shut down. Yeah.
And so the politics of Finland are really interesting. They were ruled by a social democratic party for the last couple years. This social democratic party was in coordination and in coalition with the Center Party, the Green League, which I believe this president candidate was a member of.
The opposing candidate,
yes. The opposing candidate. The Left Alliance and the Swedish People's Party of Finland. The opposition was the Finns Party, the National Coalition Party, which is the party of the winner of this, the Christian Democrats movement now, and Power Belongs to the People. Now, the Finns Party is interesting because it is a right-wing populist party, and it was the largest member of the opposition to the Social Democratic government. Now, this was in 2019. Sanna Marin led this, was the prime minister of Finland. She also initiated the process of Finland joining NATO. Okay. So now with the new election, the post-2023 elections, it's flipped. The National Coalition Party is now the largest party, followed by the Finns Party, which have gained 10 and 7 seats, respectively. Now, what I want to note about the Finns Party is they are right-wing populist. But they are not necessarily anti-NATO. They have some anti-EU sentiments, but they really feel that the largest problem coming in is with the larger issue of Russian national security, and they're not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, NATO and the EU has to go in the face of a possible Russian attack. That's not where they're at.
That makes sense. I feel like that's an issue that many far-right populist parties in Europe might come to.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if Russia gets to the point where it's knocking at their door, but they're going to realize, oh, wait a second, isolation doesn't actually feel that good in this instance.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. I'll say that the parties that lost support weren't actually the Social Democratic Party. The Social Democratic Party actually gained seats in the last election. The party that kind of got decimated was the Center Party. It was that center-centrist party that lost a lot of support to the National Coalition Party, that center-right party.
Interesting.
Yeah. But, so now we're at this point where Finland, which has a very strong military, Finland has a very, very strong military, and it makes Russia scared that they're now in NATO. Finland funded their military so well, specifically for the reason that they weren't in NATO for so long, and they had to rely on their own security. Now that they're tied into the larger NATO structure, it makes Russia more nervous, as it should.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. You want to go to the next one?
Yeah. What's next?
Let's talk about
migrants in Denver?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let's talk about the migrant crisis going on in Denver. So I don't know if I like to classify what's going on at the border as a crisis, because in a lot of circumstances, it's very manageable by the larger macroeconomic picture of what the United States is. We're a large country. We have a large economy. We have labor shortages. We have the means and the resources and the places to put all these people if we wanted to. But the crisis comes when we're not responding effectively. right? And we don't have the laws on the books in order to handle and process these people accordingly. One of the things that happens here is you have municipal governments like Denver that face the brunt of this, that don't have the resources that the federal government does have, that the federal government could be and should be using to integrate and help these people, but they're just not doing that. In a lot of cases, it's because their hands are tied. But let's go over what's going on in Denver. So Denver is a city of 750,000 people. Well, over the last few months, they have received 40,000 migrants. This is the most per capita of any city in the entire nation. And this flow of migrants slowed in the deep chill of winter, right? Because, when it's getting colder, but this is not sustainable. 40,000 people coming into your city when you only had 750,000 to begin with.
Yeah.
That's not going to be sustainable.
That's crazy.
So Mike Johnston, don't get confused with Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Mike Johnston is the mayor of Denver, and he has done a fantastic job of getting 1,200 homeless people off of the streets in his first 6 months of office. But this is not nearly what is needed now with the higher influx of migrants. The city has spent more than $42 million on these migrants. If expenditures continue at the current pace of $3.5 million a week, the crisis could cost the city $180 million in 2024 alone. This is equivalent to 10% of the city's overall budget. This is going to cripple the municipality's ability to function and operate in the best interest of the citizens of the city. So the city will begin imposing a first round of budget cuts, starting with reductions in parks and motor vehicle services. Now, the city is saying that these cuts are starting with reductions in parks and motor vehicle services. Nothing is getting cut in relation to migrant services because they can't afford to cut that area. It's being utilized too much.
Yeah.
So parks and motor vehicles are facing the brunt of this municipality budget crunch. People are getting upset that too much municipal resources are going towards helping the incoming migrants, which it's just going to be a political reality, right? Whether you want to help the migrants or you don't, it's going to be a political reality that people are going to get upset with their municipalities' services getting cut.
Of course. I mean, is now when we want to zoom out to the discussion between us about, does this throw a wrench? Is this a crisis? Does this show it is a crisis?
Well, then, but then this is where this is when I want to get into what the mayor has been kind of talking about. The mayor blames Denver's predicament on Republican leaders in Congress who have rejected the proposal negotiated by one of his own senators and supported by President Biden.
Okay.
So they want the border bill that was negotiated by Chris Murphy, Kyrsten Sinema, Langford to be passed. That's one thing. But the other thing is, he wants these migrants to be able to work. He says to become eligible for work permits, migrant must apply for asylum, and this is a cumbersome process. And then they have to wait 150 days until they're able to get a work permit. This causes a lot of issues because this means that the migrants literally cannot work for themselves and pay rent for an apartment for themselves.
Yeah.
They are reliant on municipal services because they are legally barred from entering the labor force.
Yeah.
Some have found off the books jobs in construction and housekeeping, but this is not sustainable.
No.
There were some good quotes from people here. This is one man. He said, "I am not here to beg at a traffic light. I came here to work." People cried out that they would do any honest job and that they were not asking for charity. And this is frustrating the mayor incessantly because he said he went up to one of the people who was complaining and being like, asking for a job, and he's like, "If I could, I would give you a job right now," the mayor told one of the migrants. So this is really what's causing so much of the backlog and the budget problems.
Yeah.
Is the fact that the people can't contribute to the local economies. If they were able to contribute to the local economies, getting employed, working for somebody, maybe starting their own business, if they had that opportunity, this would be looking totally different right now.
Okay. I wonder about totally different because there would still be some period where these migrants came in and they're poor, completely poor, destitute. They don't have any money, including to rent a place, right? So I wonder, obviously this would grease the wheels. This would get these migrants out of the state-supported systems of housing, shelter more quickly.
Right.
Quickly enough? We don't know.
Right, we don't know.
We can't know until we get not only work permits to come down faster, but also housing to be able to be built more fluidly.
Yes.
Right? You need both things.
Yeah, you need both things. And Denver, I think, is pretty good with their zoning laws.
Okay.
I think they're getting better and better on the right track. Housing and zoning reform is one of the things we talk about a lot on this show, making it easier to build housing. And so what I like about this story is the community was very compassionate to these people. So the community organized to disperse hot food and other necessities to the migrants. And the community has expressed that they are extremely determined to integrate the migrants, which I love seeing that sentiment, but I have to ask the question, how long can that hospitality truly hold?
Yeah, this is where you need more help. You need the system to allow the migrants to work for themselves because they won't be able to do this forever.
And you need a better federal system to not overload a city of 750,000 to make it the most migrant-heavy city per capita in the nation. We need a better system of how to distribute the migrants across the country. Because right now, these migrants are coming here because they're getting bused from Texas and Greg Abbott.
Okay.
That's what's happening.
So you need a federal system that kind of preempts the migrants that are coming into Texas and sends them elsewhere, you think?
Yeah, I think that's what has to happen. There needs to be a better federal system to get migrants better dispersed across the country so it doesn't hit these local communities hard like this.
Okay.
Because, again, it's all about the shock effect. I think once these people start working, all it's going to do is improve the area overall with time.
Yes, I agree. But it does matter that these municipalities are being completely overrun right now.
Yeah.
So, of course, instituting solutions like getting them work permits is helpful. And I think, I don't know, from a broader vision of two people who are pro-immigration and would like to encourage more immigration into the country, like expanding support for building temporary shelter for people that are coming in because they so often do come in with nothing would be enormously helpful. However, I do want to talk about how important and positive it is that this framing is that the community is going out of their way to help these migrants rather than complaining that they're ruining everything.
Hell yeah.
Because the truth is, I don't think these migrants often really impede on native-born Americans' lives, right? It's just the media blows it up to seem like much more of a crisis, and the people that it is a crisis for, I will say, are the municipal governments, right?
Yes.
And the people running the municipal governments. But it's not like there is not actually an invasion where migrants are invading people's homes, right? It's nothing like that. So I like that Denver has had the wherewithal to say, no, fuck the media. We want to help these people and go out of their way to do it. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying that they need to have some type of emergency housing system in place.
Yeah.
Because one of the way that the municipality has been housing these migrants is by renting hotel rooms.
Yeah, renting hotel rooms. Sometimes they clear out like gymnasiums and schools if they need it.
Yeah.
They'll use libraries or churches. There is no plan for a lot of new people coming into the town at once who need help.
And so if we had a federal government that was like, okay, this section of this state is going to be like a migrant integration zone where we're going to, bus these migrants up to, Denver or Minneapolis or wherever.
Yeah.
And we're saying, okay, we have this emergency shelter prepared and ready to go for these 15 days before we get you your work permit and then you go.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Or something. And so there needs to be just a better system in place to deal with all this because falling on municipal government's heavy, man. I'm involved in municipal government. And if you told me that we had to cut 10% of our budget, I tell you, it's absolutely impossible to do that.
Yeah.
If we would not be able to allocate 10% of our budget. We would fall short on our pensions. We would fall short on our health insurance payments to our public sector workers.
Yeah.
We would not be able to operate. Our school systems would be impacted. So I don't even know how they're doing it and where they're getting the money from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
To suggest it's not a problem is wrong. But, I think it all boils down to this idea of work permits.
Yes, totally. Like, I think about the work permits and trying to more specific, like, I want there to be almost no paperwork.
Yes.
I want you to just walk into meet an employer, be like, you're hired and I can pay you.
Yeah.
Right? I guess that's not feasible. We're not experts
on hold on.
That.
Republican Party.
Logistics.
Republican Party is the party of cutting the red tape.
Yep.
Of getting rid of the regulation. Okay, here's one area where we agree. Cut the red tape. Get rid of the regulation.
I think the Republican Party is, I think it's shifting away from that. I think it's becoming less and less accurate or possible to describe the Republican Party that way.
I don't think it's a neoliberal party anymore.
No.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
No.
Because now it's much more about imposing their cultural will on the country, and the economic mindset of how to achieve that is very much on the back burner.
Yes, I think we're just generally at a time of like shifting alignment within our political parties. And I think that'd be very interesting to do a deep dive on sometime.
We should do that.
Yeah.
That would be a good deep dive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be next week. I like that.
Okay.
So we're getting into budget shortfalls, and we're talking about the impacts of, not funding things correctly. I want to talk about Social Security and where we're at for a second. This isn't necessarily a current event, but it's more of like a check-in, a checkpoint.
Okay.
Where are we and what's going on in the future? Are we in danger of losing this cornerstone of the American government?
Yeah.
So last week, the Congressional Budget Office confirmed some sobering estimates. By 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund will be totally exhausted. There will be no money left in the Social Security Trust Fund by 2023. If nothing is done, this will result...
2033.
Yeah, what did I say?
Did you say 20? I thought you might have said 23.
Oh, I might have. 2033 is when the Social Security Trust Fund will be totally exhausted. That means if nothing is done, all beneficiaries will see a 23% reduction in their payouts. This is about $17,400 less a year for a newly retired couple. This is the difference. This is the difference between poverty and not poverty for so many Americans. This 23% budget cut would decimate our elderly population.
Yeah.
So something must be done. So before Social Security's inception, more than half of elderly people in the United States lived in poverty. Today, because of Social Security, that number has fallen to about 10%.
It's wild.
This is because of Social Security providing a major income boost for most seniors, specifically, obviously, on the lower end of the economic spectrum. Social Security benefits account for nearly all retirement income for Americans at the bottom of the income distribution. Think about that. There are some people that only rely on Social Security for their entire retirement plan, which is scary. Don't do that. If you're watching this video, I beg of you to fund your 401k as much as you can if you're lucky enough to have one. If you don't, fund your Roth or regular IRA. Please, begging you. You'll thank yourself later. But for a lot of Americans, they didn't have the money to do so. They didn't have the education to do so. They had no idea that was even a concept. So a lot of people live off of these payments. And this is obviously going to impact non-white people the most, naturally, because these people have suffered most from economic disparities going back.
Yeah.
So I want to give a brief little breakdown here. So marketable wealth that does not have a relationship to Social Security, okay? So marketable wealth makes up 62% of white wealth. For Black and Hispanic wealth, that only makes up 35%. That means 65% of wealth in a Black person's retirement is only made up of what they get from Social Security. And they are looking at a 13% loss of their overall net wealth if these budget cuts take into effect in 2033.
To be honest,
yes,
I don't care about this as much
Okay.
from a racial perspective.
That's fine.
But from a rich versus poor perspective,
Yes.
Social Security is so much better for the poor.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even close. I mean,
Yeah.
the payouts that go to the rich are almost negligible.
Exactly.
Compared to what their annual incomes are.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost completely negligible. So then this asks the question, how do we save it? Do we need to save it? There are some people out here that would say, no, I don't care. Screw Social Security. I fully fund my 401k.
Sure.
I fully fund my Roth IRA.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about anyone else.
And they're obsessed with the deficit and the debt, and they're like, yeah, we should just stop paying for all that.
Yes. So what I like to see is Gallup asked people these questions. They asked Americans, would you rather increase Social Security taxes or curb future Social Security benefits? 31% of Americans said they wanted to curb benefits, while 61% said they wanted to raise taxes to fund it. This is the highest that raising taxes has ever scored on this question, going back since 2005. And I think this is when Gallup first started asking the question, because 2005 was when George W. Bush started pushing his privatization Social Security plan.
Okay.
where he wanted to get rid of Social Security entirely and replace it with private plans.
I see.
So they started asking this question. This is the first time that we've reached over 60% approval of increasing taxes.
So to me, this means that it's a matter of effectively messaging that these two things are linked.
Yes.
Right? Because otherwise, people just think about the raising taxes, and that's a general bad thing in their mind, and they don't think about how it can save Social Security.
And they don't even, what I like about this question so much that makes me very happy is they don't ask what taxes get raised. They ask the very general raise taxes.
Okay.
Which means when I give you this next fact, it makes all, I would imagine this number goes from 61 to 70 after I read this next fact, okay?
Okay.
So within the current Social Security's tax structure, currently, people's payroll taxes only pay, so you only pay your Social Security taxes on your first $168,000. Only by removing that cap do we fully fund Social Security. So all we have to do is raise taxes on people who make more than $168,000 a year, and then Social Security is fully funded for like the next 70 years.
That is so backwards.
Isn't it?
Right? Like, if anything,
I could go into the history of this.
The cap should be that no one below 168,000 is paid.
But no.
That's crazy.
So you only your first 168,000. So put that in perspective. If you are making like 50 grand or 60 grand, whatever, like the median income, whatever, I think it's like 60, whatever. I think the median household income is maybe 67 or something like that. You are paying more into Social Security than Jeff Bezos as percentage of your income.
That's insane.
That's insanity, right, guys? I mean, that's insane. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that's pretty fucking stupid.
That's hard to argue.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all that has to happen. And I want to kind of give a brief example of why did this take place, right? So one of the main reasons is because income inequality has made this problem so much worse. Why is this making it so much worse? Because as incomes at the top of the economic spectrum continue to grow, their incomes are growing faster than the Social Security tax cap. So say the Social Security tax cap is growing 2% a year, right? The income at the top is growing 5% a year. So as we go from like 1980 to 2020, income at the top has grown by over 125%, while the Social Security cap has only grown by 70%.
Okay.
So less amount of money is being captured by Social Security. So in 1983, this was when Ronald Reagan revolutionized the Social Security system, and he did the best thing of his entire presidency. He doubled the payroll taxes for Social Security, making it fully funded until today. That's what he did. And because of this, he was able to capture 90% of all income generated in the United States was going into the Social Security system.
Okay.
Now, only 81% of all income generated in the United States goes into the Social Security system.
Okay.
If we got that number back to 90%, we would be totally fine. How do we get that number back to 90%? Well, it turns out by eliminating the cap, you get fully back to that 90%.
Why is it only 90? Why isn't eliminating the cap take you to 100?
Why doesn't eliminating the cap take you to 100? I don't think this counts. Well, capital gains taxes aren't hit by. Capital gain income isn't hit by.
So it's removing the other taxes that the government's taking?
What do you mean? No. I'm saying like removing the cap doesn't touch capital gains income. So capital gains income could be income that's not touched by Social Security under any circumstance.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. So it's only certain types of income.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's only labor income.
Okay.
This is only labor income that gets paid into Social Security.
Dividend income also isn't paid into it.
No, dividend income is not paid into Social Security ever.
It is perfect for rich
people. Well, I'll tell you why. This is actually, blame FDR for this.
Okay.
When Social Security was being founded, FDR was actually on the front lines saying that poor people need to pay for Social Security. Swear to God. So a brief history about Social Security. It was really pushed by Francis Perkins. This was the labor secretary under FDR.
Okay.
One of two cabinet members that was with FDR for his entire 14 years or in 12 years in office.
Okay.
Her and Harold Ikes. She was also the first woman cabinet secretary. So Francis Perkins was a big proponent of retirement income, of Social Security benefits, of unemployment insurance. Honestly, we might not have any of that if it wasn't for her.
Wow.
It might not exist if we didn't have Frances Perkins in the room pushing for unemployment and Social Security benefits. Might not have happened. But she goes up to FDR and she's like, please, FDR, fund this through a progressive income tax. Please do not fund this through a payroll tax because it's going to take money away from the people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And FDR was against the idea of total handouts. And he was like, I want people bought into the system. I want it to be insurance. I don't want it to be welfare. I want it to be insurance. So he wants government-run insurance. He thought it would be easier to sell to Congress. He thought it would be harder to get it taken away from people later down the road because people will feel like it is their money that they paid into.
Yeah.
And so he made the decision to fund it through payroll taxes when it could have been funded through progressive income taxes on the rich. And he chose not to do it.
And even if not progressive, like flat taxes that include
Yes.
dividends and capital gains and don't have a cap on them, right?
Yes.
Like,
but he was
wow.
against all of that. And actually, he was also against including a lot of people in Social Security. He didn't include household laborers. So if you were like a maid, you weren't classified for Social Security. If you worked in a restaurant, you couldn't get Social Security.
Wow.
These are things that eventually got added through Post and other administrations. But FDR was not big on this, which is funny because he actually supported in private. He would say he wanted a cradle to grave welfare state. But it comes down to this. He was not. And so because of that, we're still paying the effects.
That's brutal.
Now, what I also want to mention here is even if we change nothing, if we don't increase the Social Security cap, but we don't extend the Trump tax cuts, this would raise $3 trillion over the next decade, and this would single-handedly keep Social Security solvent for a decade.
Wow.
All we have to do is not extend the Trump tax cuts and then put that money to our Social Security trust fund. Everything's fine for another 10 years.
Which means all we have to do is get Biden reelected.
Basically, all we have to do is get Biden reelected, but then Biden has to choose to allocate that money to the Social Security trust fund, which I don't know if he's going to have the balls to do.
Why not?
The Social Security trust fund has been funded by payroll taxes forever for the same reason I just talked about with FDR. It's been looked at as a insurance program that happens to be run by the government.
Okay.
It's not supposed to be viewed as a welfare program. So Biden giving general government funds into the Social Security Trust Fund, that would be breaking the long-standing tradition of Social Security. I hope he does break it, right? I want to see Social Security be treated as a welfare program and an entitlement program rather than the insurance program that happens to be run for the government that it pretends to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a hard decision to make.
Yeah. I would think at this time where these political coalitions are changing that it seems like we are so close to being able to create a larger welfare state, right? Because on the Democratic side, more of the Democratic coalition is now made out of college-educated voters, right?
Yeah.
College-educated, wealthier voters. So if you already have those people on board, the people who are going to be less helped by the actual policies, and all you have to do is win over the people who are going to be massively helped by the policies, it seems like we should be in a good position to actually pass them. The problem is, in the current media environment, we're still struggling to get across the message to those people who would be helped by the policies that they should vote for the people who might implement those policies.
And in the current media environment, you don't get benefits for good policy.
Exactly.
You don't get benefits for it. You don't get good airtime for passing a really, really good piece of security legislation.
Yeah.
Obama didn't get good political media points for passing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yes.
Right? When it's actually one of the most amazing institutions ever created by the United States government. Almost nobody knows about it. And if you do know about it, you think it's a conspiracy run by the Jews. And it's like, you know, it de-incentivizes politicians to make that hard political calculation to prioritize good governance if they don't get the credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and this is a situation where like you blame the media and you have to blame the voters a little bit because it's like the voters are not responding to the correct information or they're not responding to the correct things.
Yeah, well, you can blame the voters, but at that point you have to put the impetus on the voters to seek out the correct information, to do their own fact checking. And the problem, I think you can say like do their own fact checking, or
no one can do all their own fact checking.
It's so much harder than it sounds.
Yeah,
right.
Course.
Like to actually figure out what's real, and you know that because there are extremely smart people who are professionals at studying these things that form completely different opinions on them. Right.
Yes.
So like there's so many things. There are not clear answers to whether they were good or bad. Whether this policy will help me or whether it will hurt me. There are different perspectives on like how, if a large welfare program was to exist, is that sucking too much money out of the private sector and thus hurting the overall economy? So it still isn't helpful for everyone.
Actually, I want to go on that point you just said. Okay. Sucking money out of the system, will that hurt the private sector? Mm-hmm. That was actually one of the arguments made to FDR to ask him not to pass Social Security.
Okay.
Because the way that Social Security was originally funded for the first 2 years or so was a 1% tax on your income that you take home, and then your employer matched that 1%, and then it went to the government for a total of 2%. And a lot of people said, FDR, you're going to deflate the economy by sucking this money out of the people's pockets.
Yeah.
You're loosening demand at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And he basically ended up saying, he was like, listen, I get that, but if we don't start it right now, it's never going to start.
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from with that, and I understand that, but if we don't do it right now, no one will ever do it for that exact reason. Which is true unless he would have taxed the rich to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's why even as I like say these things, I start to think, I feel so convinced, say, that redistributing money from the top of the economic spectrum to the bottom is positive for the overall economy.
Yeah, it is.
At least, right?
Yeah, it is.
So like it's hard to make the argument of why do smart people not think that that's a good idea? Well, then there's the more ideological purist point of view that taxation is theft. And those people earned their money rightfully, and you shouldn't be taking it from them.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be penalizing them for being successful.
Yeah.
And that's an argument that is going to be completely philosophical. So you can't point to facts
right.
and information to necessarily change someone's mind.
Right. There's no facts and figures that could ever actually get someone out of that position.
No.
Right. Because you can't logic somebody out of a position that they didn't logic their way into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of that philosophical underpinning comes from. But I want to go around and circle back to something you said about like the ideology in the Republican Party and how there might be a larger coalition that could form on the basis of trying to create a larger welfare state.
Yeah.
And I think let's make this its own section here, because like there are Republicans like Josh Hawley from Missouri, who's a senator, who I vehemently disagree with on almost everything. But in the wake of the COVID pandemic, he and Bernie Sanders actually worked together to try to pass a $2,000 stimulus check.
Yeah.
Him and Bernie Sanders have actually tried to work together to try to raise the minimum wage.
Yep.
And so there have been instances where we've seen these, pretty hard right cultural reactionaries come around and be like, no, I can get on board with some progressive politics.
Yes. J.D. Vance is another example.
J.D. Vance is another example of that. Now, listen, again, J.D. Vance, I don't agree with him on that much, but if we can build a consensus around, like,
taking from the rich and giving to the poor.
And let's make sure that Social Security is fully funded by raising taxes on people making $170,000 a year, at least take that proposal to J.D. Vance's and Josh Hawley's face.
Exactly.
And make them deny it on live TV, right?
Yeah.
Take it to them. Be like, hey, man, I know you want to keep Social Security safe. How about we raise taxes on people making over $170,000 a year and keep it fully funded forever? How does that sound to you?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I would think that's okay. Weirdly, I can't think of House Republicans that are similar in this way.
Yeah,
right?
I can't either.
So, and of course, Republicans hold the House. So you need a majority there.
Yeah. I'm thinking of some Republicans in the House that would be on board to do something like that. But it's different because it's so interesting, because the hard right in the House is such a different beast from the hard right in the Senate. Mm-hmm. I would classify Josh Hawley as a hard right person.
I would too.
I would classify J.D. Vance as a pretty hard right person. Yes. But we're still able to make some of these economic compromises, or at least they allude to them that might be possible, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the hard right members of the House of Representatives, we get Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert.
Yeah.
These are no people that would ever cooperate with the Democrats on anything, let alone some type of massive economic reform.
Yeah, that is an interesting divide to me, right? Like, it's sometimes compromise versus never compromise.
Yeah.
and they're supposedly at the same part of this political spectrum. What is the difference? Is the difference just that Senate elections are statewide, so they can build wider coalitions of people that are less just hard right Republicans in their local areas?
I think you're dead on the nose, dude.
Okay.
Because when you're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's in like a plus 40 Republican district in North Georgia.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to go to North Georgia if you're a black guy. I mean, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
So like, you don't like, that's not good. Okay.
Okay.
You're talking Cherokee County of Georgia. That is as cultural reactionary as you can find in the country.
Okay.
Right. But then you get to JD Vance, and yeah, JD Vance has to represent, rural Ohio, but he also has to represent Cleveland.
Yeah.
He also has to be responsible in some way to the voters in Cuyahoga County. So, it makes it a little more difficult for him to be totally like that. And I think Senate elections do attract just a better type of politician.
Okay.
End of story. Right? Congressional elections are only 750,000 people you're being responsive to.
What do you mean by a better type of politician? Less reactionary?
Well, no, I mean less. I think when someone gets elected to the Senate, they have a desire to govern that doesn't necessarily exist for a person going to the House of Representatives. And the reason I feel comfortable saying something like that is the House of Representatives is not as prestigious at all.
Okay.
It's not as difficult to do to become a congressman than it is to become a senator.
Okay.
Right?
So even though prestige is an aspect of the Senate, you think there is more purity in the desire to govern and lead the country?
Yeah.
So it's not just that they're doing it as a status symbol.
Yes, that's how I view it. At least I think that a different type of person goes into the Senate than goes into Congress or goes into the House of Representatives. That's how I view it. I don't really know other way to handle that discrepancy, but
yeah, me neither.
It is so interesting that there are the right wing of the Senate and the right wing of the House are so vastly different.
Yes.
And it's just...
It is weird.
Yeah. I really like the idea of us doing a deep dive on the changing political spectrum and the different coalition. Like, especially the movement of the suburbs post-Trump, right? Like, that's a really interesting topic.
Exactly.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Okay.
Let's go back into a little bit of political maneuvering that Trump has been doing recently. We have Trump shaking up the Republican National Committee, the RNC. Donald Trump has endorsed the North Carolina Republican Party chairman, Michael Whatley, to succeed Ronna McDaniel as the Republican National Committee chair.
I think it's Whatley.
Whatever it is, I don't fucking care.
Whatley sounds hilarious.
I'm never gonna.
Michael Whatley.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
Listen, Ronna McDaniel has been a terrible chairman of the Republican Party.
Yeah, they just keep losing.
They just keep losing. They lost in 2018. They lost in 2020. They lost in 2022. They've lost pretty much every election.
Lost in 2023.
Yes.
We'll see if they lose tonight in New York.
We'll see if they lose tonight in New York. Yeah, the election results should be coming in at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
But anyway, Ronna McDaniel's been a fucking absolute nightmare. Ronna McDaniel is related to Mitt Romney. So a lot of these hard right Republicans view her as the swamp, as any swamp could be. Yeah. So
I mean, she is. To be clear,
she is. No lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? Now, what makes this so funny? Wait, you know what? I want to say one more thing about Michael Whatley. What is it?
Whatley. I love how assertively you said it that time. I want to say another thing about Michael Whatley.
Yeah, it is, guys. I was an only child, so I didn't.
Let's take it all the way back.
So I didn't speak much growing up. I read a lot in my head.
I think you're pretty good.
Are you being honest with me?
Yes. Despite these occasional corrections,
okay.
That I have to come in with.
When you leave this apartment, I cry every night. After we record, I just cry and I look at myself in the mirror and I ponder why I do what I do. If you're just going to make fun of me all the time,
idiot.
God, I'm so stupid. God, this is why Mom didn't love you. No, I'm kidding. My mom loved me very much.
Yeah, you were the only one to love. So
exactly. Yeah. She had no choice. She was stuck with my dumb ass. Anyway, this is my.
That was a rant. That was
fucked up.
Okay, we just got off track.
So Michael Whatley has been very successful in North Carolina. Okay. He's actually led the Republicans to securing the majorities in the North Carolina Senate through some deep political maneuvering.
Okay.
He's lost the governor election in 2020, but truth be told, he's done a very good job of running the party down there. So hard-right Republicans are very happy to see Michael Whatley take this position. Because if he gets in there, they view like, oh man, we're going to win 2024. We're going to win 2026. We got this shit. But then Trump, because he's a fucking clown, supports his daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, to be the co-chairwoman of the RNC. Why? She was, for her background, she was a magazine editor for 4 years, and then she worked on Donald Trump's presidential campaign starting in 2016. Those are the only jobs she's ever had. And now she's going to be the co-chair of the whole national party. That seems like a really bad idea.
Loyalty.
Well,
right.
Yes, loyalty.
Yeah.
Right? Because now Trump is valuing loyalty above all else.
Yes, exactly.
Right? He's saying loyalty above success.
Yeah.
Loyalty above results.
And he's seen Ronna McDaniel as like waveringly loyal.
Yes. Right? There was actually a point where the RNC almost fully endorsed Trump for the 2024 presidential election without even finishing up the rest of the primaries with Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
And he actually was like, don't do that. Don't.
Really?
Yeah, he said don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Do you know?
I think even he recognizes that would be a bad look for everybody.
Okay.
That's that. Thank God he's at least somewhat politically smart for his own sake, because that would have been looked terrible.
Yeah.
Right. Because then all those Nikki Haley supporters, and how is Nikki Haley supposed to endorse Trump after that? Right. I want to give one shout out to what Laura Trump has said back in 2019 of April. I was just reading her Wikipedia page to try to get a good roundabout view of what she is and what she stands for. She's a very short Wikipedia page, but this quote made it, and I thought it was so funny. So in April 2019, Laura Trump described German Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to accept refugees during the European migrant crisis of 2015 as the downfall of Germany. It was one of the worst things that ever happened to Germany. Is that one of the worst things that ever happened to Germany? Pretty sure the Holocaust happened in Germany.
Yeah.
So anyway, just thought that was funny.
Very on brand.
Very on brand.
Yeah.
Well, why is that on brand? Is it because she's a Nazi? No. It's because she's stupid? Probably.
Because she's anti-immigration.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's extremely on brand under the Trump umbrella.
Yeah, of course. So Michael Whatley has been, very loyal to Trump. Following the 2020 presidential election, he promoted the lies purported by Trump to its full degree. He supported using the courts to overturn the election results by any means necessary. Eventually, he has said that Joe Biden is the legitimate president, but saying Joe Biden is the legitimate president does not mean that you don't believe the election was stolen, right? Because you can be the legitimate president and have stolen the election. All you need is the electoral votes to be certified by the House, and technically you're the legitimate president.
Okay.
So him saying that he's the legitimate president is not the bending the knee to Joe Biden's victory, as it seems to be at first glance.
Yeah. It's so scary to have the election denial normalized like this so much by so many people, because Congress still does have a role to play in ratifying the elections, and it's so partisan.
Yeah. Well, Elise Stefanik has said on national TV last Sunday that if she was Mike Pence, she would not have certified the election results. Yeah. Elise Stefanik is the number 3 most powerful House Republican. And she said flat out, she's like, nope, I would have thrown it all out. Yeah. I would have not made Joe Biden president on election day. Yeah. On January 6th. So this is the type of Republican Party we're dealing with. But I want to give one more shout out to actually the guy who used to be my congressional representative, Lee Zeldin. So I used to live on Long Island District 1, and that was represented by Republican Lee Zeldin. Republican Lee Zeldin ran for governor of New York in 2022. Okay. And he got very close to beating Kathy Hochul. Wow. He got within 5 points of flipping the governorship of New York State to red. That's wild. And he was able to do this by attacking those suburban areas and ended up doing very well in suburban areas in Massapequa. He was doing very well in Massapequa. Now, the reason I say that is because today we have an election in New York District 3 where Massapequa is. And it was like a plus 10 Trump district, but then it ended up voting by Lee Zeldin by 40-something plus points in 2022. And so he has a very good political acumen. I don't agree with the guy on almost anything, but he's a very talented politician. Okay. I really thought they were going to make him RNC chair. I really thought that would have been the right move. Lee Zeldin is a very powerful strategist.
Okay, and he was in talks?
He was in talks.
Okay.
Now, I also think he's in talks to be Trump's VP. I've heard conversation that Trump's VP is coming from New York. I've heard talks that Trump's VP has been extremely successful in past elections.
Okay.
And so I think they might pick Lee Zeldin for VP, which would be a very dangerous VP pick for Democrats, because don't underestimate this guy, Lee Zeldin. Like I've met him before. My dad has met him before.
Okay.
Like, we know Lee Zeldin. This dude is a fucking killer.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the fact, listen, the fact that I'm seeing my local representative fly through the ranks. He used to be a Suffolk County public councilman. Okay. So he was at the bottom of the food chain, goes into Congress, runs for governor all within 10 years. And he's just getting 5 points within flipping New York red.
Wow.
Yeah. The guy's no joke.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. The guy's no joke. He's a dangerous motherfucker.
Damn.
Yeah. And he's young.
Very.
He's in his 40s or 50s. Like, he'll be around for a long time.
Yeah.
So he, I if I was the Republicans, I would have picked him for RNC chair. But maybe if he's going for VP, might be better used there. But interesting that Ronna McDaniel's reign will finally be over, as it should be, with her disastrous performances.
What triggered her downfall? Why is now the moment?
I think it's just like the party chairs don't last this long.
Okay.
It's been like 6 years now.
Okay.
And normally the the person running for president installs their preferred pick.
Okay.
This didn't happen with the Democrats. I don't think our current, or the Democratic National Committee chair is a guy named Jamie Harrison. Jamie Harrison ran for senator in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham and didn't do all too well, but he raised just a shit ton of money.
Okay.
And one of the things that means you're a good chair of a party is being able to raise money.
Yeah.
So he got the spot. I don't actually know what happened behind the scenes. It wasn't too much of a talk about, did Joe Biden get Jamie Harrison in there? Very possible. I know Jim Clyburn, the number 3 leader in the House, or not anymore, but one of the very powerful Democrats in the House from South Carolina, really liked Jamie Harrison.
Okay.
So it's very possible he volleyed to get, or worked to get that person in the spot.
You were close on a word there. I'm trying to get it too. I don't know what it is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Man? You know what I'm trying to say?
Vied?
Vided?
Vied. V-I-E-D. Vied for...
Yeah. Vied.
Okay.
Vied. So anyway, point is, Lee Zeldin might be vice president. We'll see. And Whatley is going to be the new RNC chair, probably, with Trump's endorsement.
Okay.
Crazy stuff.
Yep.
Now, to stick on the election-related news, we got to talk about who's raising the money here, because this is very important to understand the trends of where these elections are going. So I want to give a breakdown of the funding totals in 2023 and who raised the most amount of money. So in Q1 of 2023, Joe Biden did not announce that he was, oh, wait, you know what? Before we go into that, I want to talk about how there are 3 different types of fundraising. There is campaign fundraising that is specifically by the president himself, okay, or the candidate themselves. There's joint fundraising committees, which means you're working with the party and the candidate themselves.
Okay.
And then there's just the party committee itself. So there's 3 different ways to raise money, okay? So in Q1, Joe Biden has not announced that he's running for president yet. So the party committee raised about $25 million, the Democratic Party.
Okay.
The Republican Party raised about $25 million, but the Trump campaign, with combination with the party, was able to raise like another 30. So Q1, Trump's raising like $50 million. Joe Biden's raising 25. Okay. Q2, the numbers start changing. Joe Biden starts raising more money. Now he's announced. Now Joe Biden's raising like 63 million. Trump's raising around 50. Q3, they even out. Both raise about $80 million. Q4 is where things change. Joe Biden raises, with the party and everything, he raises about $115 million in Q4 of 2023 alone.
Insane.
Trump only raised $40 million.
That's insane.
He is winning.
That's so much money.
He is winning the funding race. How much money is this? Okay. So the campaign has $117 million in cash on hand. He has $117 million in the bank. Again, this is money directly donated to the Biden's campaign or to the Democratic National Committee and state parties. Okay. He's got $117 million. This beats the $67 million that was raised by Obama in the fourth quarter of 2011. And it beats Hillary Clinton's fundraising fourth quarter of 2015. This is now the record amount of money that has ever been raised. Adjusted for inflation, it's still more.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is a problem. Well, then let's give a breakdown who's donating. So there were 520,000 contributions in the fourth quarter of 2023, and 97% of which were below $200.
Wow.
That is awesome.
Is that to Biden or is that to both?
So that is to the Biden campaign specifically.
Okay.
That isn't to the Democratic National Committee, I don't think.
Okay.
That is specifically to the Biden campaign.
Okay.
That's a lot of money
Yeah.
to come from that small amount of dollars each time, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. That means that the right people are, when I say the right people, I want the Democratic Party to be a healthy mix of suburbanite, college-educated liberals who want to see a greater society and working class people who are pushing for unionization efforts, who are struggling, who are in poverty. That means that those people are bought into the concept that Joe Biden is selling.
Yes.
Right? They're willing to give some money so that Joe Biden can stay in office.
Yes. They think that Biden's policies are actually helping them.
Yes. So Trump's election campaign only reported raising $19 million during the last 3 months of 2023. When I say $19 million, that is his campaign specifically. Okay? So what is happening here? Republicans are losing the funding race, okay? And not only that, Trump isn't able to spend his money as efficiently as Joe Biden. Why? Because the largest super PAC supporting the former president, this is known as MAGA Incorporated, sent $30 million to a separate Trump group known as Save America. Save America has been paying for Trump's legal bills during the second half of 2023. Okay?
Wow.
This is more than twice what it had sent in the first half of 2023. He is bleeding money fighting back on these legal bills.
Yeah.
And he's only going to be bleeding more.
Yes. Definitely.
So it's only going to get worse and worse for him as the months go on here. And I just don't think that the Republicans are going to be able to match what the Democrats are raising.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, of course, the broader conversation then is how much do you think the money will influence the election?
Well, yeah. And then that goes into the other question, right? How much will the money influence the election?
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
Oh, when I say, well, let me, a little amount of money difference won't have that much of an impact.
Okay.
If you have a large money difference, I think it very well could.
Okay.
If you have a massive monetary difference and you're able to fund in-person, get out the vote efforts, right? And you're able to do all of this.
Yeah.
That changes the fucking game.
Yeah, I also feel like for Biden, the money might be more important because he has real substantive issues and wins to talk about and communicate. It's not an awareness issue. I think money used wisely can actually get a much wider array of people to understand everything he's done and how exactly it has helped the country.
Yeah, and he's doing a really, really large ad blitz. He's bought I think over $100 million worth of ads.
Really?
Now, why is that so great? Because he's buying them early, which means he's getting them on a discount. He's buying them months and months in advance.
Okay.
So like these $100 million worth of ads that he's purchasing, first of all, they're targeted into the swing states. Second of all, they are purchased so far in advance that he's getting them on discounted rates, which means that when Trump and the Republicans operate into high gear, each ad that they buy is going to end up costing more, which means the Biden dollars will be going further than the Trump dollars. And then in addition to this, because more of Biden's money is coming from campaign-specific funding than Trump's funding, this is another aspect of elections that we should know about going into this. Campaigns actually get a discount to buying ads.
Okay.
Because they want to incentivize campaigns to get their messages out.
Yeah.
So when a campaign itself buys an ad, it actually spends less than a super PAC chooses to buy an ad.
I see.
A super PAC has to spend like twice as much money than a campaign has to spend to get the same ad on the same TV at the same station at the same time for the same amount of minutes.
Interesting.
So a campaign spending money on ads is way more efficient.
Okay.
So there's a lot of intricacies going on into this. And then I want to give a breakdown. Well, when did Trump see the most amount of fundraising? Well, 2 moments. April 4th, that was when the hush money indictment came out.
Yeah.
He raised $3.9 million on that day alone.
Wow.
The next day was August 25th, which this was post the Georgia mugshots. He raised $4.2 million on that day alone. Those 2 days are like carrying his Q3 numbers, right? And so it's hard to say whether or not that's good or bad for him, because there are only going to be more and more of those moments as we go on, I feel like.
Do you think so?
Well, that's kind of the question I have. Are those moments gone now? Is the shock factor of the indictments over?
I kind of think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, there aren't going to be new indictments coming down. It's just going to be legal proceedings.
Yes.
Like, it's all the boring shit now.
You're right. Now it's all the boring shit, which means that these fundraising boosts might be over. And, those things that have really been carrying him through the Q3 won't be around.
I think so. Also, to be clear, the April money, that's Q2. So it is.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. April 2 is the quarter.
Yes.
April is the Q2. But in August, we had 2 indictments. We had the Georgia mugshots and we had the January 6th.
Yes.
So that's where that Q3.
There were multiple spikes still then.
Yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where we are with the fundraising race. It's going to be really interesting to watch, because you always say money doesn't decide the winner, it picks the winner. Or it goes towards the winner. It doesn't pick the winner.
It follows the winner.
It follows the winner.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this could be a good sign for Biden.
Yeah, well, and we'll definitely do some analysis of like the actual campaign strategies as this goes on to see how this money is used, because I am really curious.
Yeah.
Just to see mechanically where do they decide to put these investments?
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot of money flowing into Michigan real soon, and we should talk about that, because Michigan is going to be Biden's some most important work.
Yeah.
Is going to be coming out of Michigan. So anyway, that's the fundraising race. We'll keep updated as much as we can.
So now we're going to move on to the election that just went down in Pakistan, because this is kind of crazy. We haven't talked about Pakistan before on this show, but the country has been more or less controlled by its military establishment for nearly half of its existence since 1947, including kind of right now. And with this establishment, you kind of want to think of an oligarchy. Like, it's people that are high up in the military, but it's also members of the court. It's also members of their version of Congress, their legislative body. They've just kind of driven the direction of Pakistan almost forever. Now, this election pitted a party that was backed by the establishment, which is, I'll call PMLN, and that party was pitted against the party of Imran Khan. Now, Imran Khan was the populist president of Pakistan from 2018 to 2022. But he was removed early after a vote of no confidence after failing to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Oh. So some background that we need here. Why does it matter whether Khan failed to condemn Russia? Well, Pakistan's establishment has been aligned with the U.S. since the early 2000s during the War on Terror. So they've been cracking down on Islamic militant and extremist groups for kind of that entire past 2 decades that we've seen the U.S. heavily involved in the Middle East. So when Khan failed to condemn Russia, the establishment was like, we don't really like this. So they have this vote of no confidence, and he's removed from office. Then, afterwards, Khan was jailed for selling gifts bestowed by other international leaders on him during his time as prime minister. Whoa. There's some weird kind of unimportant mechanisms here that determine how the leaders of Pakistan have to handle gifts that are given from other international leaders. I'm honestly not sure whether the prosecution was completely politically motivated or not.
Yeah.
But he's in jail now, right? And his party is still running against the establishment-backed party, okay? And what happened in the election is... So leading up to the election, the Pakistan Supreme Court, which again, buddy-buddy with the establishment, banned Khan's party, which is called PTI. They banned their symbol from appearing on the ballot. Whoa. And that's a huge deal, because Pakistan is a country of 231 million people, and the majority of them live in rural areas and are not well educated, and a lot of them are illiterate, right? So they essentially banned Khan's party from the ballot, and then Khan's party won the most seats in the election anyways.
Wow, despite all of that?
Despite all of that. And it was a huge rebuke from the people against the establishment controlling everything that happened in Pakistan. Analysts that I read at least said that this has nothing to do with the actual direction of the country, that both Khan's party and PMLN, the opposition party, have been in power in government at different times, and it did not result in significantly different policy or standards of life for their people. But they just didn't like the idea that the establishment was controlling everything, and that they tried to force Khan and Khan's party off of the ballot.
Wow.
So now Khan's still in jail. His party is going to dominate their parliament, and they would want to form a coalition around him as prime minister again, or as president, and they're not going to be able to do so.
Do they have someone ready to in the works?
I don't know. I didn't read about anyone. The question is still completely out there as to what happens, right? Because they will try to choose him, but the Supreme Court, which again is backed by the establishment, has banned him from serving. So we just have no idea where this goes. It's a crazy political situation, and I don't think it's really going to have any effect for the wider world or most of Pakistan's people. But it is kind of an interesting Game of Thrones-esque situation.
Do you think it impacts the United States and how we're able to project power in the region? Because the establishment has been aligned with our military objectives for the most part in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an anti-American sentiment to this?
Maybe slightly.
Yeah.
But also geographically, Pakistan is farther east than the countries where most of the Islamic extremism and unrest happens. It's further east than Syria, than Iraq, than
right. It's
Yemen,
not like we're
Israel, Gaza.
It's not like we're fighting in Afghanistan anymore, right?
Exactly. Now. Yeah. Pakistan's main problem is with India, and India and Pakistan's problems tend to be pretty well separated from those of the rest of the Islamic world.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's interesting because, Pakistan is one of those big countries that doesn't get talked enough about, especially in U.S. media. I mean, no international place gets talked about enough in U.S. media, right? But especially Pakistan. And it's a really interesting dynamic that, they might have a president in jail.
Yeah, it is super interesting.
And you know what? So might we. So who are we to judge? All right. Let's go down to what some of the effects are of the Inflation Reduction Act that's going on in the United States.
Yes.
I love this, guys. This is exactly the type of benefit that I want to see and that I was expecting to see from Joe Biden's economic policy. So after the United States passed the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the pieces of legislation in there was that there would be a $7,500 tax credit to any American who purchases an American-made electric vehicle. If you made, if there was an American vehicle, whatever, you could purchase and get reimbursed $7,500. Well, international car dealers are now looking at this tax credit and they want that money. And because of that, Hyundai is opening up its very, very first plant in Ellabelle, Georgia.
Yep.
This is the first Hyundai manufacturing plant ever opened in the United States.
That's awesome.
It will be able to create 300,000 EVs annually, and it could be expanded to 500,000 if it sees the demand. Hyundai is actually the second most top-selling electric vehicle provider in the United States, right behind Tesla.
Wow.
It's Tesla and then Hyundai.
Interesting.
So the fact that Hyundai is now investing in the U.S. market like this is really, really good to see.
Awesome.
And into addition of making these EVs in the United States through this plant, they're going to be using LG energy to make the batteries, which batteries are also being produced in Georgia. So the whole chain is getting produced in the United States.
That's fantastic.
All of this is because of the Inflation Reduction Act passed by Joe Biden.
Yeah.
None of this would be happening if that didn't happen. Joe Biden's economic policy is bringing investment to the United States in underserved areas, specifically in Georgia. Okay.
Yeah.
We have the Sun Belt. We're now going to have the Battery Belt. Northern Mississippi, Northern Alabama, Northern and Southern Georgia too are going to see more of these battery plants made. And it's just going to change our entire economy.
Yeah.
This plant is expected to get up and running as early as October 24th.
Wow.
And Hyundai is just ramping it up. They want it operated as fast as possible. They're excited to be making cars. And this is just fantastic because this is also coming at a time when the UAW, the United Auto Workers, are expanding their unionization efforts into these international car making companies.
Yep.
We just talked about last week how Volkswagen is facing a union battle in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And now if the UAW starts winning like that, winning all over the place, it's going to spread into these other places fast.
Totally.
And if we can get the dual, avenue here of federal money going into investing in the business and then workers fighting for their rights on the back end, that money is going to be going back to them, going back to you, and we could just see a whole more equitable economic industrial machine here.
Yeah, this is like the opportunity of a positive economic spiral here is incredible.
Yeah. No, it really is.
Yeah.
And I just want to see more international companies come to the United States because of these tax credits.
Yeah.
And this is something that I hope, this is something for the sake of Europe. I hope they do something similar, guys.
Yeah. Well, this is something that obviously helps our resiliency of our supply chain when, one, we are going to be getting a lot of support and manufacturing from Mexico. But right now, China dominates all of this. China dominates EVs. It dominates batteries. So to be actively and effectively incentivizing these companies to come and put these factories here, I don't want us to shut out Chinese cars and Chinese batteries, but I do want to protect against the possibility that China will try to block their own exports to us to try to squeeze us in the case of something like a war against Taiwan.
Yeah, or even to block ourselves from the eventual Chinese decline.
Yeah.
Right? The Chinese, manufacturing engine will not be present in a decade and a half. It won't be there. It just won't exist.
Yeah.
And so we need to have all the stuff ready to do it ourselves.
Totally.
And this is what Joe Biden's economic policy has been able to do. This is Bidenomics. That's all I have to say, dude.
I'm good.
I think I'm good. We're going to make the deep dive the Social Security thing.
Okay.
That'll be the deep dive for this.
Cool.
And let's watch those election results in New York. We'll know the result in 2 hours. Big deal.
Very exciting.
All right.
Bye,
Talk to you
guys.
later, guys. See you next week.